Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Josh.
I still think Hannah should turn this on sooner because everybody missed my good joke.
Oh, yeah, you did it.
No, I can't. And it's one of those two you can't do twice.
It really is time stamped just for that moment.
Man.
I know.
I hate when I miss those.
But it's nice. People know we were enjoying ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you been doing okay?
Yeah. You?
It's Friday.
I know. It's our time to look at each other.
I know.
Without just telling each other things to do.
It's like, you look the same. Okay, good.
Yeah. You're not.
You're
not
older.
missing a limb or
You
anything.
don't look a week older.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.
I did get some good sleep last night. That helps.
And
You look really nice.
Thank
too. You.
Oh, is that what you thought that meant?
Yes, I did.
That would be a really bad backhanded compliment. Mm-hmm. Hey, you don't look a week older. You don't look older. That's good. That's horrible.
I feel like people have probably experienced that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Backhanded compliment.
Yeah, we should do an episode on backhanded compliments. Let's write that one down.
Okay. Yeah.
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 We'll probably get a large response.
I bet.
From that.
I bet.
Right. Okay. Well, do you have plans for the weekend?
Yeah. I guess I know. I
mean,
think about what day it is.
Do you look forward to Fridays?
For work? Fridays, you mean?
I think your hesitation tells me everything I need to know right there. Yeah. But I'm asking because I used to look forward to Fridays, but now Fridays is just like, what, tomorrow's Saturday. I still got stuff to do.
Yeah, no. There's always tasks, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so.
It's a different task or a different location of task.
I'm hoping this is a stage of life thing. Like, you're like headstrong into your careers. Your kids are like headstrong into their school careers, you know, and super busy. And so it's like, you know, Friday, it's nice to you know, transition into something else, but
right,
you know, I have already have things planned for tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday. So
yeah, but it also
most of them requiring me doing stuff,
doing things. I try to tell myself that means that I've got important people that matter or something. Sometimes I can tell myself that. Sometimes when I'm just driving all over the state, I don't know.
That you matter.
Sure.
You have there's a people that see you as important and you matter.
Driving. I'm a very important driver.
So you're so important to us. So would you drive to us?
Can I have ice cream again?
We won't come to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do think moms have it much harder in our world. So.
Oh, thanks.
And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, yours Fridays must be way worse than mine. You got mom stuff to do. I got dad stuff to do.
That's true.
Yeah. I get to cut down a tree with a chainsaw.
That's pretty cool.
In a way. Yeah. There is a part of me that's like, I'm going to cut off my leg while I do this.
I know. Yeah.
But
don't do that.
And only because I haven't done it in like 20 years. But
it's a lot of work, but it's really gratifying work. That's one thing that's different.
What is it about destroying something?
Power.
And it's not either like cutting down a tree with a chainsaw is way more rewarding than using an axe. Because it's like a clean destruction. Yeah.
And you hear it and all those elements.
Yeah. I wonder why the brain likes that. Okay. We need to talk about what we came to talk about.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about parenting in a digital world. Mm-hmm. And so we'll get into the structure of that. So don't go anywhere. We're back. After a long break. We're going to talk about parenting in the digital world. So welcome to Therapist Take. That's what we're going to do today. Before we get into the structure, the format of this episode, just to remind everybody to please subscribe to our channel on YouTube particularly. And don't forget to ring the bell so you can be notified when our videos are posted. But also, we will eventually drop this episode on the audio platforms for the podcast. And so head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the other various platforms where you get your podcast, and make sure you follow our show there. And then also give us that 5-star review and maybe even say a couple kind words. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're going to talk about parenting in a digital world. So before we dive into that, we'll just kind of go over the format. The first thing we're going to dive into is just the question of should parents be concerned about this, and the difference in digital natives and the digital immigrants. We're going to talk about that a little bit, and it's a particular book we're going to reference with that, which I keep holding the paper up. And then we're just going to talk about the do's and the don'ts of parenting in a digital world, and then we'll kind of finish out with talking about some different resources. So,
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you hear parenting in a digital world, what do you think of?
Phones, screens, internet, apps. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of so many. I mean, there's so many things. That's what I think. That's what I think. Like in thinking about my kids, and and the task of parenting is kind of daunting, anyways.
Yes.
And then you start throwing in like all this monitoring task. Like,
I know.
to have time to monitor like an Xbox and
I know.
a phone and a tablet and TVs and YouTube and what YouTube channels they're watching,
Yeah.
and then not to mention whatever they're doing at their friends' houses and stuff.
Yeah. No, I think the monitoring thing is definitely overwhelming too.
Yeah.
I think any parent who starts to really think about it, it's like trying to do long division in your head. Because eventually you're like, I don't know.
So funny. Is that a thing where people say like long division is kind of a reference to like us daunting?
I think so.
Because I love long division.
6 digits divided by 5 digits or something.
Well,
That
not
takes
doing it in my
forever.
head for sure. That's definitely like a little bit. That's ridiculous. That's not
That's
even
exactly
daunting.
so.
That's not even daunting.
So
I'm not
is
doing
monitoring.
No. Because that one I got to do. But like, it's not daunting because I'm not doing it.
Oh, okay.
Period.
If you had to do it, it would be daunting,
Yes.
right?
Yes, the idea of it. So.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I can see that. Like, you could really overwhelm yourself as a parent, being like, oh man, like I forgot to check what new video games my kid just bought, and two, they don't buy them in stores anymore.
No.
I mean, my 16-year-old's always texting me like, hey, I just bought a video game and I put $5 on your desk, because he knows he's got to pay for it, but he, it's attached to our credit card. So, and I'm like, I don't know everything that he's buying, and
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, and that's hard. I think it kind of goes into one of the points is I don't know all of that stuff.
Right.
Right. So I have to
Yeah.
rely on other sources telling me about this is good or not good. Right.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Is there anything in your parenting tenure that you feel like technology-wise has been the bane of your existence?
YouTube.
Me too, 100%.
YouTube.
Yeah. Which interestingly enough, might not be the most dangerous one.
I don't know. I mean, maybe not, but I've noticed it impacting my kids' moods, my kids' sleep, my kids' like focus and attention.
Yeah.
I think it's the most like a pornography, perspective. They can scroll and scroll and scroll and find more and find more and find more.
You know what it reminds me of?
What?
Because casinos, the slot machines at casinos.
Sure.
Because people look like zombies. They're there to enjoy themselves, but there is no affect on their face. They're completely zoned. They're zoned in, and so I've even mentioned that to my kids. I'm like, you guys watch these YouTube things, and I don't even see you laugh, or you're just watching, and your face is just stoic. Yeah. And that one definitely, coming home and seeing one or all my kids sitting on the couch glued to the TV, but particularly, which usually means YouTube. Is like I just feel like the sense of failure just rushing up into my body and being like, and of course it's their fault I failed, so I have to get on them about it, Get off the TV. What are you doing?
Sure.
This house is a disaster.
Every standard parent response right there. Right.
When I walk into my house, when I walk around the corner, so first thing I do is walk past the laundry room. And my oldest son has a pet rabbit, and in his defense, He is a wonderful pet owner, way better than me even to now, but definitely when I was 16. But even now, like, he cleans his cage, he makes sure the rabbit's fed, he lets us know if we need to get bedding or something for him, and he gets him out every single day and just gets him some exercise in, you know. I don't know how you play with a rabbit, but he lets him exercise. And so the first thing I do is walk past this laundry room that still smells like a rabbit.
Always.
You know, so that's my first experience. I come home, I smell rabbit. Okay, I'm used to that. Around the corner, you know, I'm entering to the kitchen, and the first thing that's right there is the trash. And then off in the distance is the little, you know, formal living room where the kids watch TV. Like, it's got a big TV in it. And usually there's someone's in there. And so I'm smelling rabbit, seeing trash, and then seeing them watch TV. It's just not a good, you know, what wires together type thing in the brain, where it's like, you're enjoying yourself way too much right now. I just smelt rabbit and
such piled trash. Yep.
So, anyways, I just thought of that. That's I probably should go in a different door.
I think you should. Maybe you should walk backwards.
Maybe we should go blindfold. Maybe just go in the front door.
You could, if that makes you feel better. Or maybe you should say, "Everyone stand up before I come in, so I can see that you see me." Give
some kind of warning.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Dad's coming home.
Dad's on a tear.
Yeah. So, but yes, but I think there's, you know, I think. Let's move into the first question of should parents be concerned, and I think the answer to that question is yes. Yeah. Right. We should be. I think an unconcerned parent is probably the worst type of parenting, you know. And so, so I think if I were to rephrase it, like, should we be as concerned, you know, as we are with it? And that I don't think there's such a clear cut answer. But I think the first thing I want to talk about with that is when you go back in history, there's always been a bane of a parent's existence. And it's usually, when I think back on it, and this is just kind of anecdotal, and I haven't done like a ton of research on this or anything, but it seems to be like it's always the technology of the day.
Yeah, sure.
Cars, you know, or... you know, music is I think music, that's the constant, right? Like, all, you know, if you think of the expression, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, you know, we're thinking back on, like, your music, you know, like my parents, I remember my parents telling us about that, you know, my parents growing up in the 70s, you know, so, you know, they're listening to rock and, you know, some of the greatest music ever to be made, you know, CCR, and but then enter the 80s, you got Guns N' Roses, and so Metallica, and then of course in our generation, you know, what do we have? We have the hip hop, the you know, the hip hop movement of the late 80s and 90s. My parents were freaking out about. You know, we couldn't even wear Raiders gear. Were you allowed to? Did that hit your house any?
No, I was a household of girls, right? So it wasn't as.
I think they did a 30 for 30 for that on ESPN. And I remember feeling so validated.
Oh, really?
When that came out, and I'm like, because we were not allowed to wear Raiders gear because of the hip hop movement in Los Angeles. You know, because Ice Cube wore Raiders gear.
Yeah, I know.
Basically,
I see it in my head right now. Yeah.
And so, you know, and then for me, with my kids, I'm like, their music, I feel like it's just crappy. It's not, you know, I'm not worried it's going to
pollute their minds.
No, I'm worried that it's like going to make them dumber, you know, like.
I feel that way.
There's no real art in it. Come on.
Yeah.
That's not true.
That's
I'm just
not,
being, but I think
there's something.
There's always something like that, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, and I definitely know that when I was a kid, that laying around and watching TV, like, it's, you know, making you lazy and dumb, and all you want to do is talk on the phone. You don't want to, you know, all of that technology of that time, right?
Right.
So sure, I think the question of should we be concerned, but in what ways should we be concerned?
Right.
That's what I think is really a more productive and helpful question to ask.
Right. Yes. So. That one of the challenges, and one of the books you and I really like, is this book right here, Closer Together, Further Apart, and we'll put a graphic on the screen. But it's written by Rob Weiss and Jennifer Schneider, about just technology in the 21st century and how it's the differences and how it's affecting us and everything. And we're going to get into the second thing here in a little bit about digital natives and digital immigrants. But one thing that really struck me about this book that I really agree with is how, there's all this research that says this is what's happening. Now, granted, this book was written in 2014, and we're going to talk about, that we do have some case studies and outcomes and stuff to talk about now. But back when this book was written, it was in 2014. So we're, cell phones have been around iPhones as they are now have been around 2 years, 3 years. Is it 2012 when they came out, or is it earlier?
I don't know, but close. They were still early. Yeah.
So, but it still wasn't that long ago. Mm-hmm. And, let me just read a quote here for you. So we'll put that first quote on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. But it says, this is coming from Weiss and Schneider. What we do know is that these 21st century fears have evolved out of 20th century beliefs and experiences that often don't accurately reflect the realities of the world our children currently face. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that really resonated with me. Yeah.
Right. Like you're talking about, I can't understand kids' music, et cetera. Like I can't understand their use of technology because it's not like was available at all for you.
Things are so different. Right. Well, let me just read the second quote, and then we need to move into the second point because I think it's going to be a good segue. So the second part, this is actually in the very next paragraph of that very same page, where he says, "Our children of all ages are using digital technology whether we like it or not. Is it affecting them? Yes, absolutely. Are they developing and growing differently as a result? Yes, without question. But the likely outcome of this reality is both far from understood and too early to evaluate." Now, this is in 2014. Right. We actually do have some evaluations now, I think. Mm-hmm. But it's just, we're looking, or then in 2014, we're 14 years into the 21st century, and the world of technology is blown up with the introduction of social media, which, through Facebook, which was, I think, somewhere around 2006, 2008. And then, iPhones and technology as it is, and the streaming services coming around at this time too. Right. And so I remember a friend of mine talking about this to me, and he was older than me, and his kids were older at this time. And he said, I'll be watching ESPN, and he said, used to, it's just, you got just like one screen, it's just like one picture and you're just listening to people talk. So I'm watching ESPN and, and they're showing they're giving commentary of a particular basketball game, and they're showing the clip of the game. Meanwhile, they also have a sidebar going on, and they have a lower third where they're running script, like more news is coming through that as well. Mm-hmm. And so he's watching this clip, and he hears his son go, "Oh, Dad, did you read that?" And so he goes, he goes, "No." He drops down to the lower third and starts reading the words coming across the screen. And then all of a sudden he hears his son say, "Oh, Dad, did you see that?" And then his eyes are back, and he realized in that moment that his children can see all of it at once. And he can't. He can just, his brain is trained to just see. If he's watching the image, he's watching the image. If he's reading the text, he's reading the text. But they're doing it all. Mm-hmm. And so, that's what I think Rob Weiss and Jennifer Schneider are talking about in this book, is that they're definitely not saying don't be alarmed, don't be. They're not saying that at all. They're actually right before if I had to put the whole paragraph on there, the first thing they say is absolutely have a plan, be concerned, but the outcomes are still too soon to tell because these kids are growing up in this environment of tech that we have moved into. We didn't grow up like that. Our brains didn't develop like that.
Right.
And theirs
Right.
are.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if it were us, maybe the outcomes would be, more accurate, or at least what we're assuming would happen because of how our brains have evolved.
Right.
But I think at least at that time, I agreed 100% that it's just too soon to tell.
Mm-hmm. Because we are, as you want to talk about point 2.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. We are not digital natives, right?
Right. We are digital immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that distinction.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny to be around and tell people, we joke about this at the office, Josh, the birth of the internet and the sound of dial-up, right?
Yeah.
And what it was for your house or your school or whatever to get internet access, and to tell the origin story, right?
I can hear it dial up in my head right now.
Yeah, I can too. And so it's not something that we've been born into, right? Yeah, we were born into technology, right?
Right.
But we weren't born into what our kids are. And by the pace of technology, have a kid, and a decade later, if you have another kid, those two kids are born into very different, even digital worlds. Right. So, but I think it's important to point out what is different, and us trying to put our understanding on it from our perspective is probably going to miss some things. Us meaning us, digital immigrants.
Right. Yeah. I think, and that's where I think we need to step back and take a breath. Mm-hmm. Not saying don't be concerned, but also realizing that the world of the digital native is different, mm-hmm. So let's kind of put it in a little bit different perspective, and let's use the words native and immigrant, okay. And kind of like how most people would think of it. Mm-hmm. And so you might know somebody that I definitely do, that who grew up in America, but whose parents did not. Yes. And the challenges that come with that, mm-hmm. The cultural, getting acclimated to culture is something that the native, sorry, I went back to digital, but the person that is basically a first generation American, let's just say, doesn't have to really get acclimated to right. American culture the same way that their parents are. I do think there is some adjustment because there is a blending of cultures, yes, right? Right. So it's not as simple as just saying that they're just 100% acclimated. But there's I know I've worked with people before. I'm thinking of one in particular that we were doing family therapy. And the son, this is way back when I was working with teens, and so he's a teenager, and his dad doesn't speak any English, and so everything I'm saying as I'm doing therapy, he is having to also translate. Yeah. Wow. And it just dawned on me. I was like, this is his world, right? This is what this kid is growing right. up as an American, whose origins are from a different country, but also having to navigate parents that don't right. understand in a very real way, because of the language barrier, but just probably too, just in a just cultural understanding mm-hmm. and things that he gets, and I think that's actually where the conflict was happening between dad and son. But it's just, so you look at that from a technological standpoint of that, we're watching something happen mm-hmm. with our children that we do not understand. And on top of that, we don't even know the outcome. We don't even know if this is good or bad. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. It's just different right now. So those are two key ingredients for some real anxiety. Oh, heck yeah. Right. Our kids are guinea pigs. Mm-hmm. you know.
Ugh, I hate that.
Yeah, I mean, they're the first. And so, you know, yeah, it's kind of scary. But think about friendships, for example, like, you know, so I would venture to say, like, so let's go back to like the late 90s, early 2000s, okay? If, you know, if my kids are spending all their time on Mario Brothers, you know, it's just, they're completely engaged into this video game where it's just a solo game, but then by themselves. And if it's not a solo game, it means somebody's sitting right next to them playing it with them, right? That's not how it works anymore.
Yeah.
You know, when my kids say my friend, there are basically 3 different types of friends that we're talking about here.
Right.
Gaming friends, school friends, and then community friends.
Yeah.
You know, and so, which is weird that I have to clarify, you know, but
Which friend?
my wife and I have talked about, especially like my oldest, who does a lot of gaming. He's also very introverted. That, you know, his early on before he could drive, you know, he would have friends. I mean, a lot of his friends were online, you know, and so. And now, of course, when they're in school and stuff, school friends can also be online friends, but they also meet people through those systems, you know. And he's getting social contact,
right?
But there's still a screen division, right? Like we know with working with, therapy is much more effective when we have our clients in the office with us. It's not effective when they're on Zoom or something, but there is that barrier that, you know, making somebody 3D into 2D, you know, does, you know, add a different challenge. And
yes, it does.
You know,
yeah, and I think that because that's unfamiliar to me, that it's very easy to discount those friendships. Those aren't your real friends, right? How do you even know? I asked my son, the only one of my kids that does that for age, and I ask him all the time, I don't want you playing things with people that you don't know. And then he always rolls his eyes, but Mom, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you just don't get it.
Yeah.
And I don't get it.
Right. And how much of our fears there, like, are realistic? Like, you know how easy it would be for someone to find us if somebody really wanted to prey on my children. I mean, my kids' pictures and stuff are everywhere on social media, and they're probably time-stamped and have locations attached to them, and you know, and that's stuff that my wife and I have done, you know, like, or that family members have, like,
sure, like,
and so, like, how realistic is it to be, you know, that worried about, you know, what, you know, that they made a friend with somebody online that they don't know in real life, right? Because is that a grown up, or is it?
I heard my son on a chat the other day, and the other voice sounded very much like a grown up, and so I went into his room and I said, "Who is that?" And he told me, and I said, "Well, ask him what deductions he took on his taxes this year, because there's no way that's a kid."
And I said, "Can you help me on mine?"
I know, and he did the same thing, Mom. You know,
yeah,
ridiculous. And it actually turned out I met the parent of that kid, and she was like, "I know he has such a deep voice." She probably didn't think he was joking. A kid. Yeah, she knew. Oh. But the point of it is that I was alerted and alarmed right away, right? Yeah. Where there's just not a track for me, and there is a track for these, you know, digital natives. And so, but I also think that you can't, like I tell him a lot, you don't understand the dangers of the world because you're a kid living in a world, not an adult living in the world, right? And so it's okay that I'm wrong. But it's also, you know, very, very true that he's misinformed because of the life experiences.
Exactly. And so I don't want people to hear me saying like that, that you shouldn't be alarmed. I do think you should be. I do think there needs to be rules, and, you know, like the rules of our house is like, if, you know, you do not give out your phone number, you don't give out where you live, you don't give out your last name, right? You know, things like that. It's not so much I'm worried about them, you know, playing video games with an adult or an older teen, or that it's it's more about how influenced kids can be.
Right.
So it's the predators that are using those avenues to try to get this or that, or at worst trying to find their way into the lives of our children. And of course, as our kids get older, the fears shift into and kind of other things.
Right.
And so because of the way technology is and how vast it is and how much there is, it's like you said, it's overwhelming, it's daunting. I used to be really worried about all that stuff, like particularly like protecting my kids' eyes from like pornography. I really now have got to the point where there's, I've just come to understand like how that there is a lot of powerlessness that comes in the world of technology right now with our guinea pig children, basically. And so the thing that has really been on my mind that has become the gist of my concern is really has to do with, what content they're producing or that they're sharing amongst each other.
Okay.
Like I almost in some ways I'm like, have very little concern about pornography, even though I know that they're probably going to see it at some point. I really just don't want them to receive a nude photo from a friend whose ex-girlfriend sent them a nude pic, and then they get it from a friend, and the next thing you know, we got a whole distribution of child pornography thing going on, and we're having conversations with attorneys and in court and stuff like that, which happens. You and I both know that happens, and so that's kind of the conversations that have been happening in my house of like when we hand those cell phones over to them, we're like, let me tell you something. Like, I remember the first time we told my middle son when he got his phone, he was like 12 years old. And we told him, like, don't take nude photos of yourself and send it to people. And he looked at us like we were out of our mind.
People in the world,
Why would I do that? Like, I was like, you say that now.
I know. Well, it's kind of that mantra of that I often think of when it comes to parenting. We can't protect them, so let's prepare them. And so when you say statements like don't take nude photos, you're preparing them, right? So that when that is asked or talked about, they'll have a reference point, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to not ever have to say that because there's enough trust or whatever we want to say that won't happen. But that's the same thing with my kids won't watch pornography. Well, kids have access. They're going to see it earlier than any other generation. And so just prepare them, right? We have to be active in that. And being active also isn't about just throw up your hands and handing them, access, unfettered access. But what can we do? And then what, kind of, in other words, what hills are we going to die on? What hills are we going to really, really try and fortify? And that can be really overwhelming, especially like we're pointing out, but when digital immigrants are parenting digital natives.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing to think about too is that what scares me a little bit is that the system that governs it are also digital immigrants.
Yeah, I know.
Right. And so and we're going to talk about Jonathan Haidt here in a minute, but his original book, or the one that kind of put him on the map, which was The Coddling of the American Mind. And he talks about how, because of the way technology has worked and how you can, send alerts out to the masses. He basically was saying, back in the 80s, the putting pictures on a milk carton was kind of the first massive kind of, nationwide fear-mongering type thing. What word am I looking for? Where you're like spreading mass fear, like fear-mongering. Is that right? So, but it, it's like he was talking about that, that child abduction is the lowest crime, one of the lowest crimes in America, and it gets less every year. He's like, but every time, if you think about it, every time you go to the store to get a carton of milk, and there's a different face on it every time you do it, and that's happening to everybody drinks milk. right? So of course it's a mass panic. That's what I was trying to think of. Okay. It's creating a panic among parents that this is actually happening a lot everywhere,
right?
When it's actually not,
right?
And so, so then the system responds to it, and so then he's got, he tells these stories about like, how, 15-year-old. He just gets locked outside of his house after school, and his parents aren't home, and he's just playing basketball on his driveway, and someone calls the cops for because in their mind the parents were neglecting him, and the parents had to go through this whole legal thing. And I know that's kind of anecdotal, but but when we think about like this whole thing happening with our kids, because I do think my hearts go out to the victims of kids, the victims whose pictures get passed around and things like that. That is heartbreaking, and there should be consequence for it. But putting a 12-year-old and running them through a legal system of, production and distribution of child pornography, in my mind, is just asinine. Like, that's not what that law was for. My guess is whoever put that law into effect was not thinking about a 12-year-old sharing another picture of a 12-year-old to another 12-year-old. You know what I mean? And so but it's also, there's this thing going on among kids that are digital natives, that the digital immigrants who are running the show aren't understanding.
Yeah, that's a really great
so
point.
that's what's alarming to me about it. Anyways, I kind of went on a long rant there.
Yeah, well, and I think you brought up Jonathan Haidt's book that we wanted, his newer book. I think it's titled something, The Anxious Generation.
Okay, I have not read this one.
I haven't read it all the way. I've listened to him talk about his book, and I've listened to him talk about his research. But and he has some pretty strong recommendations. But he actually did do some of the research. Why did we see this incredible spike in anxiety, right, around 2015? I think that's the year when he said he really started, like, they started noticing when they were gathering data, and especially in teenagers, and even more especially in teen girls. Well, what year was Instagram?
Is that 2015?
So it was after Facebook and Instagram started, right? Yeah. So when the huge rise of these social media platforms rose, there was a significant, sharp increase in anxiety and depression symptoms, right?
I knew that was true with Facebook, but I'm wondering with Instagram, does he talk about, because the nature of Instagram is mostly photos, pictures, right?
So I think that was what was unique. I mean, especially then, it was what was unique about Instagram compared to Facebook and even, the older platforms. But so it's not necessary that he or we are saying it's causal, but it's definitely strong correlation, right? And so he talks about the anxious generation, just when you're bathed in comparison, when FOMO is constant, right? Don't you think that's going to be a little overwhelming to the brains and nervous systems of developing teenagers, when being, part of their development is being included, right? Finding a belonging place, right? That's not their family, right? That's something else. And so when you've got all these other messages of ways you don't belong or should belong, it's really getting in the way of that developmental process. Yeah. And so I'm that's on my list of books next, but I've listened to him talk about it, and it makes sense from us being clinicians. It also makes kind of just intuitive sense, like, oh yeah, that makes you feel a lot crummier about yourself, right?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, I mean, it definitely tracks for sure. I think we should make a new word though, like for to go along with FOMO is FOOCMO. Okay, what is that? Fear of our kids missing out.
Yeah, that is true.
Because don't we do the same thing? Like when I think about like all the baseball stuff my kid wants to play and do, and that I get sucked into doing, and I'm like, he doesn't need to play 70 games a year. Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm still convinced that kids need more practice reps and game reps, but all they want are those game reps. Why? It's because the neighbor kids do into game reps, and their school friends are are doing this, and it's just all trying to keep up with the Joneses, when in reality, I don't really think it it gives them that much more of an advantage.
Right. Well, especially what advantage are you talking about, right? I mean,
Oh my
right,
gosh.
you think about it, right?
Don't get me started on that. Yeah,
I mean,
you're right.
It's hard not to. And I mean, just because my brain is, on the downslide as far as it's not developing, right? It's just aging. But just because we're not, just because we're not,
It's undeveloping.
It's undeveloping. It's unraveling. Just because we are not in that same developmental stage doesn't mean that we're not affected in similar ways, right? Fear of our kids missing out. It's a great point. Yeah. But to kind of take Jonathan Haidt's book and transition to our last point, what do we do about it? He comes out and says some pretty strong things, such as...
Let's hear him. So we're in the
do's and don'ts.
Yeah,
these are his do's, right?
Right. The do's and don'ts.
I'm going to start just a couple with his, and then we can talk about ours. So his do is...
Of parent responses, yeah.
Is they can have a phone. His don't is don't give them internet access and unlimited internet access and social media until high school.
Okay.
Right? So they can have a flip phone. He's wanting to start like a flip phone phase where you can have phone to call and text and communicate, but we're not going to give them, access, internet at their fingertips, right?
Yeah. So on that note, by the way, when we first was getting our kids' phones, like we looked into flip phone, and of course we probably could have looked harder. I'm sure they're out there, but it's like there weren't any.
Yeah.
Like there was a quality phone. I think they had one that was like real, like you could tell like if you dropped it once it just shattered or something. But it's like, we should really, these phone companies should really go back and invest in some really quality flip phones.
There's been some things I've seen on social media about parents getting onto let's start a trend where my kids have flip phones.
Yeah.
Right. So, but those are the ones that really stand out, around how do we limit that? How to prepare? What do we do about this? Right. Some of the do's also that we can even talk more about is, yes, you do need to monitor your kids' use of the internet, of their social media, of their messages, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I linked a couple old videos from, Diana Giles, she's an IT person, but she is taking special interest in what she calls in his coin, like this is her trademarked name, is sensible cyber parenting. And but I didn't even realize there are things you can do if you just go into your log into your router at home. She's like, there's just some simple codes that you can do to help protect what content is coming through. But but it all too is like kind of evaluating where your biggest concerns are, and so like for me that is like a lesser concern, as I just mentioned. What's more concerning for me is what is being exchanged, and so more so than monitoring what they're searching on the internet, which I do. But what my kids do, and they know we do this. That's the other thing too. I'd say is don't lie to your kids. Let them know that you're doing it. Like don't secretly go into their phones. Like let them know that you will be going into their phones at some point. You don't have to tell them when you do it. You can just say a random point in time. I'm also not going to ask you to hand me your phone and do it right in front of you either, because the last thing I want to do is see my kids searching out some pornographic website and find it right in front of them, But we monitor their texts probably more so than anything, which they know. But we go into their search history, and of course, we have things, like under parental guard and things like that. But the other thing to remember is that, they're always at friends' houses and stuff like my parents, so back in my day, we didn't have technology the way we had it now. We were reduced to like Playboy magazines or something like that. And so did my parents subscribe to Playboy magazine? No. You would not be able to find one of those in my house at all. But I had friends whose parents did.
Sure.
And guess what we were doing when nobody was home? We were curious, as kids are. And nowadays, it's a lot scarier because I would go out on a limb to say that stumbling onto an image, a Playboy image, is not as troubling to the mind as a kid these days stumbling onto full-fledged hardcore video pornography.
Sure.
And the kind of the trauma that can different type of trauma.
Yes.
But to your point, yes, I do. Monitoring is a do. Mm-hmm. What are some other do's? Plans.
Do make sure that sleep is not interrupted or
yes.
A part of technology. I mean, my son's phone is in my room at night.
Yeah.
He doesn't even have access to it.
Yeah. I have a little cell phone holder. Mm-hmm. Put your cell phone in there.
It's put up. It's mine. It belongs to me. I mean, that's the thing is I always also tell my kids about everything. They don't own anything.
Right.
It's all mine. Yeah. It's your phone that I let you use.
Yeah.
Right. But it's mine. And so I can do with it whatever I want. And that means that I get to check and see everything. That's something that as they get older, I will respect some of their privacy. But privacy and secrecy are different. Right. And things that could definitely harm you, I'm going to keep. So comes into my room at night also because I don't want. The other night I forgot to turn his off, and at 2:30 in the morning he got a text message. And so it woke me up. So I was furious, right? Because I love my sleep.
Yeah.
Right? Who's texting my kid, my little kid, at 2:30 in the morning? Another little kid, I guess, who wasn't sleeping. But the whole idea is I'm glad it was in my room, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
It's a lot to ask impulse control to get woken up and see who is it and then start talking or messaging or whatever.
And the argument my kids would make is like, that's where I use my alarm. So you know what we did? We bought them alarm clocks.
I have that too. I did the same thing.
And so don't buy blue light glasses. Like they're not going to wear them. It's so ridiculous, anyways. Like
probably not.
Who's going to put blue light glasses on?
But I also think do make sure that you're modeling that stuff too.
Yeah.
If you're staying up all night on your screens, that's
right.
I'm not saying you're growing up, you don't have to do it the same, but just it's the idea that we're going to protect sleep.
Right.
It's important.
Yeah. I want to address one major don't.
Okay.
And then one final do.
Okay.
Okay. So the major don't is don't tech shame your kids.
There you go.
I say that, I can't say that with a straight face.
I know.
Because I know I've done it. I think probably if we're all being honest, we've all done it.
I've done it.
Or like, I told you the story, or probably the thing that comes out of my mouth the most, and I kick myself for every time, is when, it's hard. You can't, when you trying to get kids out of the house, you can't get them out of the house. When you want them to move faster, they move slower. You want them to move slower, they move faster. And it's like, and they're like, oh, I forgot this, and I'm like, what you didn't forget was your phone, was it? Because I saw you on it for 30 minutes when you could have been making sure you had all your stuff ready, right? But, dogging on them for all their video games or whatever, if you're gonna, address an issue, just address the issue. You don't have to take that shame route with it, because if it's something we know about shame is that's going to help. They're going to dig in their heels. I mean, it's going to, you make a big deal out of it like that in a shameful way, it makes them feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, and that's going to be a real hard battle now, just to be honest with you. If your kid is feeling a shame from you about their, tech use, and they live in a world of tech, and they have to choose one or the other, they're picking tech. You're a teenager and young adult. I don't mean they're casting you out. I just mean they're going to keep using it. It's too much in their world.
Yeah.
Right. So don't think shame is effective is what you're really saying too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's talk about this final do. And the final do for me is, I think it's a big one, is the reality is that we don't know how, we don't know outcomes anyways. We have general outcomes.
Right.
And, through statistics and everything. But for you particularly, in your style of parenting, the challenges your children face with the activities they're doing, that's why it all feels so vulnerable. And I think one thing that stands true today that stood true then that will stand true today is that one of the best things you can do to protect your children from tech addiction, porn addiction, video game addiction, or a plethora of other different types of challenges other than addiction that stem from technology, is to have a good relationship with your child.
I agree.
So one thing is keep your dialogue open with them. Like, this isn't a one and done deal.
Right.
It should be a dialogue.
Right.
So yeah, you might look at some of these things as some of the things that Jonathan Haidt's saying to do. I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, like I didn't do that very well, and I didn't do, but what is your relationship like with your kids?
I agree.
Like, are you keeping a dialogue open that's about real things and real challenges, and instead of just trying to dodge real life things that might be going on in their world because you don't want to talk about them or because you feel helpless or
sure, yeah. But you're going back to the core of why we do what we do, right? Is because up against all the challenges on this planet, a secure relationship is how you navigate.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there's one thing that's within which I do think is within the control of a parent more so than the kid. We would like to believe, it's definitely more so than the kid, is developing that quality relationship with your child, a quality, trusting connection.
Yep.
And because if we think about like a lot of like stuff that we work with like addiction, we often refer to it as an attachment disorder, right? So there's not a healthy attachment. Right. They don't have healthy attachments, and that usually begins in childhood. So create that healthy attachment with your kid. Don't overkill.
Yeah.
They'll be on to you if you do that. But,
right. Yeah. I think that's a great way to sum it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we didn't really dive into all the resources, but I did put a list of them in the description as we speak, but I'm probably going to go back and I'll add the Jonathan Haidt book and anything else that
we think of after we stop.
Yeah, after we stop. Yeah. But thanks everybody for being here, and I think we're gonna take a week off next week, and then we'll be back. Hopefully she'll be able to make it, but we're gonna have Dr. Catherine on with us to talk about chiropractic. How do you say chiropractic? Chiropractics and mental health.
Cool.
All right. See you.